Today's guest is Haris Jaliawala. He is a senior product manager at Vivante Health, where he is interested in the intersection between technology and business, and especially how it can be used to leverage for large-scale problem solving. So Haris has also started angel investing in order to learn more about how funding works, which he'll talk a little bit about. So thanks for joining me today, Haris.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So for those who have never had an opportunity to meet you or get to know you, talk a bit about your background, where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, I think most backgrounds in product management are non-traditional since there's no degree for product management, but I can talk through that. So my parents moved from the US to Pakistan very early on. They had originally grown up in Pakistan, and so they moved back. So as a baby, I moved back to Pakistan, and I grew up there. So everything from second grade up to college was all in Pakistan. I studied robotics. I was always interested in a lot of different things. And what robotics allowed me to do was get a touch of mechanical, a little of computers, a little of electrical. And so I studied a bunch of different things in college, played around with a lot of hardware. But while I was in college, I was also trying to pay for school. And so paying for school led me to starting a freelance business on campus. So that was sort of my first foray into tech, into running a business, into startup world, even though it wasn't really a startup. And so started building websites for people, that expanded to doing digital marketing for people, that expanded to building web apps for people. And those same people on campus graduated, went to large corporations, and that word of mouth referral continued. And so that business expanded to, instead of me and my friend and my business partner doing it, at the end of it, we had hired about 12 people full time, and it was fully remote across multiple time zones. So I was always interested in remote work, always interested in building web apps. And so I never actually worked as an engineer. I was just running that business for 5 years. And then towards the end of those 5 years, started to come to this conclusion, the business isn't really scalable. Our life goals are much bigger than just running a lifestyle business that sort of gets us by. And so I moved back to the States then. This was based in Pakistan. We had clients in the US and in Pakistan. So I moved back here, shut down my business, and started thinking, okay, what do I want to do? Fortunately, I landed in San Francisco. And so a bunch of startup people that I could chat with and met with, and someone, heard my story about the things of what I was doing in my business and said, you should look at product management. It sounds like you were doing mostly that. And I had not heard the term product management before that. And so I looked into it, and got really interested and got super sort of hyper focused. That's what I want to do. I don't want to take an engineering job or some other job. I definitely want to go into this space. So it took a while, 6 to 8 months, a long job search of product management, since I had no formal product management experience. But started at a company called Correlation One. They were doing HR tech software then, a bunch of different novel ideas around how to recruit better in the data space and AI space, and helping large hedge funds and large financial services firms to hire the best talent and sort of figure out who is the best talent. So did that for a few years. At that same company, helped launch an ed tech business from 0 to 1, which is now a large global product across Europe, US, North America, and South America. And then eventually thought, hey, maybe I should try something new, learn something new. And so now I'm working at Vivante Health, which is a gut health focused app and program, sort of helping employers lower their cost of healthcare and helping sort of people get the gut healthcare that they need.
That's interesting. So I like that you went to school as an engineer and then kind of took a sidestep right along the journey because opportunity came up. The business was doing well enough, right, to make a living. And that's interesting that you recognize that. I think that many people who start a business, especially in the web development space, right, I agree with you, there's a certain limit to what you can do scaling wise. I would say unless you maybe go work for like government agencies or something, right? Building big business systems. Some government likes to pay consultants to do that sort of thing. I work in the GovCon space, so I see a lot of that. Was it luck that you said luckily you landed in San Francisco? Was it truly luck? I mean, how did you pick San Francisco?
So that's a great question. So first, going back to the scalable question, I think knowing what I know now about the agencies that have scaled, business models that have showed up that have enabled people to do better in that business, I would likely have stuck with it. But with the information I had then and the market conditions then, it did not seem scalable. So just for anyone else listening out there, if you're running an agency, don't think it's not scalable. It is. But it was the act of you're always hiring people and always finding projects and just balancing that to have good margins, right? That's the whole business. And so did not like that for myself. So regardless, I would probably choose this, but scalability would not have been that much of a factor if I knew then what I know now. And then in terms of landing in San Francisco, it was a choice. I knew I couldn't afford to live there as I moved here without a job, so I only went there for 1 week. I had family there. I stayed with family. I asked them if I could visit them and find some, random space in their house to bunk for the night and spend the day out, like exploring the city and meeting people. And so, it was not completely luck, but it was a somewhat well-informed choice that turned out to be good because it led me down this path.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, it's startup central. Depending on the time frame you were there, there's constantly engines of opportunity, lots of failure, lots of success, right? San Francisco is well known for that. Yeah. So how do you get experience to be a product manager? I mean, you had a company where you were building product, right? And so that made sense that your friend said, hey, product management is kind of where you're in. How have you grown that experience?
So there's two parts to it, right? The second part that you asked is, first part is how do you get that experience? And the second part is how did I grow that experience or grow that skill? I'll answer the second first, which is how did I do it? I've always worked at really early stage places, often without formal product. Like I was the first product manager in, right? And so I was driving a lot of it. And so for me, learning was always like meeting people, talking to people, watching a bunch of videos, conferences, speaker sessions, reading a lot of blogs, books, etc., etc. Everything under the sun. But I think what is important for people who are getting into this is understanding that the majority of content out there for product management is from people who have worked at large companies. And not at super early stage startups. And product management is much different in those stages. Yes, principles are the same. So as long as you are a first principles thinker and you're not taking everything that you're reading and learning as is, and you're going deeper, like a couple of levels deeper, where you're questioning why they do certain things and then sort of extrapolating that to doing things at your sort of in your team and at your company, then I think you'll be fine doing that route. Otherwise, there is this trap of you will overuse frameworks, overuse certain practices at large companies that are not fit for the stage of company you're at if you start if you're at a startup. And then for number one, which was the question was, how do you get that experience to get into a PM job? I generally advise, and this is the advice that other people also give, but I think it's very true, is just get a job where you're interested working, especially if it's startup. If it's larger company, then there's other routes, but if it's startups, just get a job as whatever and just sort of horizontally move into PMing if you can. Because startups they can't teach you, right? They don't have the budget or the resources to teach someone. So they will be looking to hire someone for a role that this person had either done before or can showcase that they'll be able to do effectively or something like that. And so whatever skills you have, find companies that you're interested in and they need that skill. Once you find the subset of companies that matches both of those things, just get in. Once you're in, they will likely either not have a product management function, or as they grow, will hire lots more product management people, and just, make that move that way. It is, in my opinion, very easy to move horizontally at startups because everyone's just learning. A lot of people haven't done these roles before, and so there's openness to it.
Yeah, I would almost say the same thing goes for like very early stage businesses, right? With less than 20 people, maybe. I've worked at a few companies like that where I was the senior software engineer, but I also did this other thing, the network stuff or the server stuff or the desktop stuff, because there's only so many of you and everything has to be done, right? And so I could see learning by osmosis, if you will, by participating and sitting next to people who have different roles.
Exactly, right. And often I have not experienced this because either I am the first PM in, or there's already a product management function. But often I've heard stories of where a product designer who was interested in product joined, but then because there was no product management function, they naturally started taking that role, or an engineer started taking that role, or
Mm-hmm.
a business person, right? An operations person, whatever else started taking that role, marketing person started taking that role. And then they eventually either the company says, hey, you should do this, please, full time, make it a formal function,
Right.
or they show that interest, and then the company is like, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, just what you said is spot on. Like either through osmosis or taking part. That's the best way to get into it.
So you're known for helping companies that are in that early stage, right? You've provide some is it your advice? Is it in how to get the company started? Is it in how to get the funding? Is it a little bit of everything?
Um, it's not how to get the company started, and it's definitely not how to get funding yet. I think that will become a I am getting into those areas more, and I think that will become a thing in a year or two, or less. But right now, what I generally specialize in is a few things. So one is early stage product research, right? So someone has an idea, someone has a space they're interested in, someone has something similar like that, and they're trying to validate their idea or start building something that people will want to use and pay for and things like that. So very early stage, what do I build? How do I build? How do I validate my ideas? So early stage product is what I would call it. I've done that multiple times at multiple companies, and that's what I specialize in. The other piece that I am now really good at is also like, how should teams be formed to ideally do this work, and when should team formation change? What should their processes be like? If you want to work with an offshore team, which is often the answer for entrepreneurs today, because early stage they don't have the funding for it, and so they want to build their first prototype as cheap as possible. What are some things to look out for? And so that sort of realm is where I generally stay.
So how did you get to where you started angel investing? What's the thought process behind that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I just started angel investing. As you may know, US laws for who can angel invest are just plain stupid, kind of, right? I know they're working to change it. There's a bill in the Senate now, but in general, it's hard to qualify for it. Once you do qualify, then it's about building that deal flow and sort of looking at deals. The reason I started getting into it is less about investing that money and seeing any sort of returns, although that's not a zero factor. Obviously, I do want to do it well. I largely got into it to see the flip side of starting a company, right? So if I think about, hey, what role would I play if I start a company, which is my eventual goal, then it would be, I'm going to do product. I know I'm going to have to do sales. Every founder has to do sales. So I'm starting to get some reps into that of like, how can I get practice there? Then I'm going to have to fundraise, right? Especially if it's a venture-backed company, then that's like one of the core things a founder does. And I have no idea about how the fundraising process works, or I did not. I feel just in the last 2 months, like I've learned a lot. And so angel investing was basically that. It was, money that I know might go to zero or will likely go to zero, but an investment to learn the fundraising process and understanding like how investors evaluate these decks and pitches and conversations and what questions are asked, and that way sort of you learn both sides of the coin and are as ready as you can be.
Smart. So you mentioned to me before we started recording that you started in kind of the HR space in product management, and now you're in the healthcare space. What facilitated that change in industry?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'll give you full context of how I made that decision, right? So, or how I even got that idea of that I want to make this switch. I was in a call slash speaker session or something a couple of years ago, with, I don't even remember how to pronounce her name, but Gianna Zhang, I think, right? She's now a professor at Stanford, teaches a product management course that is offered at Stanford. She's the VP of product at Webflow. And so she was giving a talk, and she was talking about how she decided what companies to work at. And for her, it was different cultures. So she worked at, she started, I think, at Dropbox or somewhere like that. And it was a purely engineering culture, right? So engineering drove most decisions. Everything was technical, and you had to be super technical to get into it. She then worked at like Airbnb to see like what a design focused sort of design led culture would feel like, where, as you know, like the founders were designers, and a lot of design based culture is there. And then I don't remember where else, but like she went into these different cultures and different product cultures, and sort of experienced it that way. And so that was an interesting idea. I was like, I always thought that way, because from early days, like I mentioned, I've always wanted to like learn a lot of different things. And so this difference like really helps expand how you think and learn. But I was like, this validates my thinking that this person has been able to do it and is semi-successful. But then I didn't like really feel that much like I care about different cultures, right? Whether it's technical or design or that. But what I did care about is like different industries. And so my first product that once I got a job here was in HR tech, right? Doing assessing and finding talent for larger enterprises. My second one was education, teaching AI and data science, and then now many other skills. So building a platform for teaching skills. And so I started looking primarily at fintech, and a little bit of health tech, a little bit of other things, or even legal tech. And so those are the sort of interesting products I found that had open roles and that I could move to. And then, when interviewing, I found this team to be really good and where I could see myself. So joined healthcare for that reason.
And healthcare from a health tech perspective is amazing right now, right? There's huge innovations in not just the what the doctors do, right, and how they cure or help patients, but even just behind the scenes, the administration tools, the records management tools. There's just so much going on in that space. I hear about it constantly whenever a new innovation comes out. Machine learning, large language models, blockchain was talked about for a while within the health tech space, right? Is that something else that attracts you, like this, the variety of technical solutioning or opportunities?
It does now. When I made the choice, it wasn't necessarily a factor. Because it was actually one of the industries that I never looked at a lot and never understood what is out there and what new startups are doing, what are the new trends. I didn't really follow the space. But it's been, I don't know, 7 months or something since I've joined. And day in, day out, that's what I'm thinking, and that's what I'm looking at, that's what I'm reading. So yes, now I agree that there is a lot. There's also a lot of opportunity that's untapped, right? Because there's all of these barriers to entering health tech, from a compliance perspective, from a old school lobbying perspective, and a bunch of other factors like that, which it's hard to do something big here, but if you do it, there's a lot of value to be captured. So yes, that is definitely it. And then in terms of what I'm working on now, I'm just thinking what I can say and cannot say. Um, in terms of what I'm working on now is generally an AI and ML team. And so we are looking at things that the industry generally does not do. One, it creates efficiency within our operations, but also I think provides a really good patient experience compared to both traditional and digital health sort of solutions out there. So more to come on that, but in general, yes, it's an exciting space, and sort of in the sort of middle of a really exciting sort of development that's happening, in the world now, and we're using it. So yeah.
So as you've gone through this kind of journey you've been on of your own business, and then the HR tech, and then education, and finally in the health space, what's something you've interacted or seen that you wish, man, I wish we just did that better, right? There's a change that could be made if people were taking some time and effort, or maybe we came to you, Haris, and said, Haris, you have the power to make the change, make us all aware of something that should be changed. What would that be for you?
I think there's a lot of things like that. Um, I'll talk about product management in general, right? Like one of the questions you asked me was like, well, how do you find a job in product? Um, and a closely related problem, other than how do we find a job, is that product needs for an organization are ever evolving, right? And so the kind of product manager you need for your first couple of years is someone who likes ambiguity, likes talking to customers, and is fine with ambiguity, doesn't need a lot of structure, um, and can experiment with a lot of different things, find ways to build things cheaply and validate. But that's not true for what you need in the next stage and the stage after. Once you found product market fit, you want someone who's great at scaling, who can work with marketing, who can, if you are product led growth, then can contribute to PLG motion, and things like that. And so it keeps changing. And so, like, I don't remember whose code this is, maybe Casey Venters or from Eventbrite or something, but like the shortest sort of tenure in all of the C-suites is the CPO role, right? And that's because the CPO you'll need as a company keeps changing every few years. And so they can't really stick there long term. And one CPO that was great for you from year 5 to 7 might not be great for you from year 7 to 10, right? And so I think two things that I would want to fix it, or not fix, make better, is one, companies get educated magically somehow, right? If I could snap my fingers,
Right.
Companies get educated that there is this ambiguous, and that product roles may not be as long term as they think they will be, and so they can better communicate their needs in the current stage to candidates and to who they're looking for. I think they're going to find people quicker, and they're going to, like, expectation set will be good. And then I think I already kind of said the second piece, which is like they do communicate this out. Like oftentimes teams know exactly what they want, but because they think that they won't find the right good candidates, or candidates will go away from it if they're like hyper specific of what they need. Who cares? You don't need 1,000 applications for a role. It's better if you get one application for a role, but that's the right person, right? That's the ideal case scenario. You spend no money on recruitment and you found the right person. So I would hope that more teams strive for that.
That's an interesting thought that you said, like, over time, the needs of the organization from a CPO perspective would change, probably, based on maturity of the product, the market of the product, right? It may have started in a single market, and now it's in maybe 2 or 3 different markets, and you need somebody who's got that grander vision. It would be very interesting to do hiring from a perspective of saying, hey, we need you to be our startup person, right? You're here, we're looking for you to be here for the first 3 to 5 years, and here's why, here's the type of person we're looking for, and then make a transition. That's a really fascinating idea. I could see that paying off for companies. And interestingly enough, I have some intersection with some product companies, and I have seen that role change, right? You see that person move on because they're like, and this stuff's boring now. I want that fast paced first startup stuff, or vice versa. The person coming in is more steady, right? More solid. So that's a very interesting concept. But you could
Exactly.
almost say it about hiring in general, right? Most companies don't really understand how they're hiring, right? Even in the product development space, the engineers or the software people, it's the same problem, right? There's the people who want to build it, and there are the people who want to maintain it, and they're not the same people.
Exactly. They're definitely not the same people. And then like I feel like actually software engineering hiring is even worse than product manager hiring, because one is like interest of like maintaining and building new things and being product centric versus being like super code centric, like coding practices and things like that. But also like this idea of we want to hire a full stack person. Like, okay, but a full stack is like, a unit, like, yes, there are people out there that have perfected or are really good at both ends, but like that's what everyone wants to hire. Don't say that. Say like, what are the business's needs right now exactly? What projects would they start for the first 3 months on, or something like that, and that will help guide you to who you should hire. Everyone wants a full stack who is perfect in all regards and knows all languages, but like that doesn't really happen.
Not very often, right? I agree with you. Very, very much unicorns. There was one company I worked for where they had one of those unicorns, and they didn't let them work on a specific project. They were there to help everybody with everybody's project, right? Because they are so valuable. If you go hire for that valuable position, you're never going to find it.
Exactly.
So what's coming up for you? What do you have? What do you see in the future for you?
So right now I'm heads down learning the healthcare space. Really focused in getting even more technical with the AI and ML space and all the possibilities in healthcare. Um, Medium term, I'm looking to start a company. I have no ideas yet. I do have a lot of ideas, but no ideas that I'm committed to, obviously. And so long term, just building the skills to be a better product person, better salesperson, better fundraiser. So that when I do make that switch to starting or thinking of starting something, that I am well equipped for it as much as I can be.
Well, Haris, I look forward to that day and seeing what it is you produce. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.